Moody Bible Institute.
Yeah.
And Brandan
Robertson.
Robertson.
Yep.
And so, and so, just say something a little bit about your background, taking you to Moody, and then what got you involved in this.
Yeah. So basically, I didn't grow up in a Christian home at all. I was raised with some idea of belief with God, but my parents aren't Christian or religious by any means. With an abusive alcoholic father in a trailer park in Maryland. And by the age of 12, the abuse had taken a toll on me to the extent that I was suicidal. Every day I would wake up thinking, am I going to kill myself today? My life was heading nowhere very quickly. And my neighbors, 3 houses up, were this strange religious family. They wore long dresses, they went to church 3 times a week. Their dad was in the military, they read the Bible all the time. It was just this whole package deal, and the whole neighborhood thought they were the strangest people in the world. But I became best friends with their 2 daughters, and as good Christians, they were fundamentalist Baptists, it turns out. They invited me to come to church with them. And so I started attending a very large fundamentalist church in Baltimore, Maryland, and dove head in.
Was it a Baptist church? Or?
Yeah, it was IFCA, which is Independent Fundamentalist Churches.
Okay.
And I dove head in. I had a conversion experience, got saved, as we put it, and started leading the teen street preaching ministry. So every week we were out in the streets of Baltimore preaching the good news to people. And yeah, my life was transformed, truly. And I formed this relationship with God that actually gave me a lot of hope and redirected my entire life. But then I started asking questions. And as a 13, 14-year-old fundamentalist, asking questions was a dangerous thing to do. I started looking into Calvinism, of all things, and it started getting the people at the church pretty worried. The youth group actually started to kind of exile me a little bit, and it all culminated in me sitting in the pastor's office with a couple deacons, and the pastor said, basically, get out of my office and get out of the church, and don't come to me for help anymore. And so
And that was over Calvinism?
I can't actually tell you exactly, like, I don't know what all it was for. Calvinism is one thing, but yeah. And I took his instructions. I was broken into pieces. I called my mom hysterical on the phone and said they kicked me out. She came, picked me up, and within a month, I ended up in a evangelical megachurch in Columbia, Maryland, with a black pastor, which was a big deal for me because I had grown up in a pretty racist culture. And they used the NIV Bible, which was satanic, and they had a big band, and so. But what happened was, this church started showing me what it meant to love. The pastor came up to me one Sunday, this mega church pastor, there's 4,000 people in this church, and the pastor comes up to me and says, "What's your name?" I say, "Brandan." He says, "I really appreciate the Spirit of God in you." And immediately, my racial walls against him and my theological walls began to crumble. And this man, his name's David Anderson, kind of took me under his wing, and the church took me under their wing and empowered me. The church is called Bridgeway Community Church, and their big mission is building bridges across divides. So I started getting into that. And my pastor wrote a book, and Brian McLaren endorsed the back of it, and I said, everything I heard was that Brian McLaren was Satan in the flesh. And my pastor said, "Oh no, I don't agree with him theologically, but we can talk to him. He's a friend of mine, I love him." And that shocked me. So, progressing right through that, everybody at this church, Bridgeway Community Church, we have 5 pastors, all 5 of them graduated from Moody Bible Institute. And compared to Bob Jones University, where I was planning on going, Moody seemed very liberal to me. And so I applied and got into Moody, and very excited. And started my degree in pastoral ministry because I've known since I was 12 and became a Christian that I was called to be a pastor. And at Moody, I came in as a raging Calvinist. Literally, my people called me on campus John Calvin because I was hardcore, Mark Driscoll. I was all in. But I started getting pushback. And some people started saying, you're a very arrogant little freshman coming in here thinking you know everything. And over the year, I discovered they were right. I went from one form of fundamentalism to another. I thought I knew all the answers. And that's when Rob Bell wrote Love Wins. So I'm going through this personal process. Love Wins comes out. Everybody at Moody rejects it. I thought Rob Bell was a heretic, honestly. I'd never read anything he wrote, just going by what I was taught. But I decided, you know what? Maybe I'm going to take a different perspective. Let me defend Love Wins, even though I don't know what it says. And so I started defending Rob Bell. I got a copy of Love Wins, and I started getting really hard pushback. People calling me heretic for the first time. And I agreed with them everything theologically, but I was a heretic. And that really startled me. And me and my small group of friends decided to start a radio show after this called The Bridge on Moody Campus Radio. And we started interviewing everyone from Tim Keller to Brian McLaren to Tony Jones, just a big spectrum. And when we wanted to interview Brian McLaren, we actually got an email, and it said, no, you can't do this. We're getting bombarded with emails. We can't have Brian McLaren on our radio.
And this was who saying this?
This was
Moody?
Somebody
from
this
Moody?
was a student radio station, and it was the student director of it.
Okay.
And eventually that led through the series of events concerning that. We ended up leaving the radio station and started a podcast. But at that point, we went from being called The Bridge to a new word that I thought was so clever called Revangelical. And I just sensed a kind of calling to rethink, reform, and renew evangelical Christianity, because there was so much baggage, there was so much fear. The fact that we couldn't talk to Brian McLaren was a big problem for me, especially reading Jesus and seeing him sit down with prostitutes and tax collectors and all these marginalized least of these, and we can't even talk to Brian McLaren.
Yeah.
And that really began to transform me. And I started writing, and we started continuing to interview people. Now this brings us to last summer, where we came to the first Wild Goose Festival, not knowing what we were getting ourselves into. And we just got to sit down with Brian for the first time. We got to sit down with all these people that I was told were monsters and heretics, and found out that we agree on almost everything, and even where we disagree, these people are filled with God's love. And I was attracted to that compared to the Reformed community that I was looking at, which was always against people and preaching this message of fear. I was hearing the message of Jesus, fear not. And yeah, my faith really took a 360, and I've been writing for the past year. I've had the opportunity to write with Red Letter Christianity and all these people that I would have disagreed with, and now I find myself right at home with them. And so the big mission of Revangelical, the blog and podcast, is to really push the box for those who are like me, because my generation of evangelicals, we have a lot of fear, but we're also very attracted to openness. And a lot of people want to be able to explore different ideas and different theologies, and we don't think that our box contains God. And I want to help evangelicals like me be able to hear somebody say, it's okay to do this, you're still a Christian, God still loves you, and actually your faith will be strengthened through the questioning and through the dialoguing. And so that brings me to where I am today, and that's the purpose of Revangelical.
So you're like, it's kind of like a detoxing from the things that create fear.
Definitely.
And therefore barriers between.
And that's the thing, is that there's no, and I fear things, but there's no fear theologically for me anymore. Like, I can sit down with a Muslim, and I'm not afraid to talk to a Muslim. I don't think that they're intrinsically hellbound. And it's a beautiful place to be.